When God made us, He gave us hair. And the reason for having hair is so that when you are in an air-conditioned room, you don't feel cold. When you don't have hair, those of us who do not have hair, I can tell you, it feels a lot colder. That's why I need a jacket when air condition is blowing on your head. But then I am very comforted because I often tell my friends that God is good and God is fair. To some of us, He gives brains, to all the rest, only hair. Now, I have decided to do something differently. I decided to read you from my book so that you all can go to sleep without having to worry too much about struggling to listen. So this chapter is chapter 22, is called When Silence is Golden. According to John Keats, the famous English poet, speech is of time, silence is of eternity. In 1973, the year I started practicing law, I lost a primary school classmate to cancer. He was only 26, and he was survived by his wife and infant daughter. How does one bring comfort to the grieving widow who is now wholly responsible not only for her own life, but also for the infant's well-being? What is there for a friend to say that would be meaningful? How can a friend help in such circumstances? Despite my training as a lawyer, a pastor, a psychometric analyst, I was at a loss. I was afraid of intruding, saying the wrong thing, or making her feel even worse. A half-century has passed, and I have gone through many situations where I have reached out to the grieving. I still find myself often weeping with those who weep and not very sure at all what to say. I don't think we can fully know what grieving people really need. According to the American Psychological Association research, it shows that most people can recover from loss if they have social support. So how can you give that to them? Psychologist Deborah Serrani, author of Depression in Later Life, writes, "The goal when talking to someone who has experienced an enormous loss is to express your heartfelt concerns in a way that doesn't minimize, invalidate, or cause an emotional blunder. Those who lose loved ones are often overwhelmed with a flood of intensely painful emotions, which may lead to anger, guilt, profound sadness, and depression. In their grief, they do need help to navigate through the roller coaster journey of finding peace and comfort. In the face of such excruciating pain, it is understandable that we feel inadequate and helpless. We are placed in a situation like Job's friends in the biblical narrative. Their friend Job suffered the loss of his sons and his wealth in a sudden turn of events in his life. They did what they could to be helpful, but the end goal was not achieved, judging from Job's reaction. "You are miserable comforters, all of you," he told them. What did they do wrong? Did they not try to be comforting? Of course they did. And they did good to begin with. They made time for Job in his grieving. They were genuinely empathetic as they began to weep aloud, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. They commiserated with Job in silence. So far, so good. Things started to go wrong when these friends broke their silence and made long philosophical speeches to Job. They pontificated, misconstrued the nature of God, suffering, and the meaning of life and death. They professed to understand the mystery of life and death, pain and suffering. Their understanding was too superficial and their explanations were too glib. Their problem is simply this: they said too much. In situations of grief, less is more. What can we learn from this ancient text? Difficult as it is, we must not shy away from being present with the grieving friend. There are friends I know who avoid grieving like a plague. A friend's teenage daughter committed suicide and noticed his friends moving away from him. It was perhaps an effort to avoid a difficult conversation, but avoidance is unkind, insensitive, and alienating. It can really hurt. If you care, you should just reach out. It will communicate that you care about him and his pain. That is very comforting. When we convey our sympathies, what we mean to say is that we are empathetic. I find the Tagalog word malasakit, a core value of an organization I spoke at in Manila some years ago, very meaningful. Most Filipinos immediately recognize that word. It means, literally, to share the pain of another person. That's malasakit. How can we share the intense pain of a grieving friend? Diana Gottsman, founder of the Protocol School of Texas, has a simple piece of advice. Everyone has the awkward moment when we all want to say the right thing, she said. And we have to remember that the right thing is just showing up. Just putting your arms around your loved ones and just saying simple words like, I am really sorry. By practicing the art of being present, we are letting the grieving friend know that we are not there to give a lecture or to give any advice. We are there just to listen. And in such a situation, active silence is positively golden. Most of us are not used to silence, and we need to be very willing to sit in silence. Sometimes the bereaved does not feel like talking. You should let them know that by not pressing or talking, that it is perfectly all right not to talk. Your presence in and of itself is the source of comfort. Remember that people grieve differently. Many grieve for 18 months and 24 months. For others, the grieving process may be longer or shorter. Be careful not to suggest or pressure the bereaved to move on, before they are ready to move on. This can retard the healing process. The famous 5 stages of grief that our brother mentioned, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, don't necessarily follow one after another in sequence. And we should not be telling the bereaved what stage they are supposed to be in their grieving. For goodness sake, don't do that. When talking to someone who's grieving, focus on the right now and not the future. And don't put a time limit on grief. Well, we have Mark Well, a co-author of Softening the Grief, What to Say and Do to Comfort a Bereaved Mother, describes grief as a wound that scabs over but never totally heals. So while you can express the hope that it will be lessened, the most important thing is to reassure the bereaved of your ongoing support. Don't be troubled when the person lashes out at God or loved ones, isolates himself or cries incessantly, and becomes obsessive about wanting to be with the deceased. Don't take any of the negative reactions personally. The bereaved person needs the reassurance that feeling profoundly sad and deeply painful and even completely devastated and hopeless is only normal. Writes Dr. Sarani, be non-directive and let the grieving person just be instead of telling them how to feel. I used to be anxious about what to say when reaching out to the bereaved. But I have learned since that it is far more important to relax and give undivided attention in being present. I have learned to give the bereaved space and time to open up if they want to talk about their pain. It is cathartic and therapeutic to talk candidly about the person who died. When well-meaning friends change the subject or avoid talking about the deceased, it hurts the bereaved because they may feel that no one really cares. So let the bereaved know that you are prepared to talk about death. The ability to ask sensitively to help open up the emotions and facilitate the expression of deep-rooted feelings goes a long way to help heal the pain. Never be nosy. Always give the bereaved the freedom and choice to decide how much they wish to share and to be sure to listen with undivided attention. Patience is a very key element if you are sincerely willing to listen. People who grieve deeply may talk at length about the person they miss badly. They may repeat the details ad nauseum because retelling the traumatic story is a way of processing and accepting death. According to some studies, pain evidently lessens with each retelling, and by listening patiently and compassionately, you are part of the process of their healing. Just by listening, you are part of the process of healing. In an achievement-oriented culture like ours, we are used to the idea of having to solve problems and to repair brokenness. We are always ready to propose, plan, fix, interpret, explain. But what is needed here is not proactivity, but presence. But just acknowledge that you hurt the feelings. This is not the time to reason about how they should feel or why they should accept things, that there is no need to solve their problem at all. All they want is to know that we care and to be heard. Give them space for their words without interjection. Some describe the approach as passive activism. The comforting presence does not take charge and direct, but grants the sufferers the dignity of their own process. When you show them unconditional acceptance without judgment, argument, or criticism, you are giving them the comfort of being themselves and dealing with grief in their own way. What are some of the things said that have proven to be unhelpful to a grieving person? How are you doing? That's very insensitive. She is grieving, man. What do you mean, how are you doing? And that is how she's doing. Better to say, this is very hard on you, and you have been on my mind a lot. As an active member of my faith community, I often hear well-meaning people say, it is part of God's plan. This can be said by the grieving person as a statement of her or his personal faith, but it should not be freely said by others to the bereaved. Do you know what I mean? Some things are better said by them, not by us. Count your blessings, someone said. I believe that, and I practice the attitude of gratitude, believe me. But this is not for me to say to them, not to the bereaved at that time. It's certainly not the right time to say it, unless she is saying it, which means that it's a blessing that my husband passed away. Come on. At least she lived a long life, some people say. Many people die young, you know. Well, long or short is relative, and it is no comfort to say that the deceased live a long life when the bereaved is missing that person and would want them to live longer. Okay, so don't say that. There is a reason for everything. Wow, what a great philosophy. Emotions are not subject to reason, and to say that to a person who is overwhelmed by emotions is counterproductive. It is almost impossible to think of a good reason for death to happen at that very time. Be strong, we say. That's meant to be motivating. Be strong. I know, yeah, be strong. But in a grieving situation, it will come across as very patronizing. Perhaps the bereaved do not want to be strong. He said, okay, I don't want to be strong now, okay? Yeah. They just want to have a good cry, a good scream, to vent their anger, express their sadness. We should always let them. There is no need to be strong. I understand. Oh yeah, you do, eh? Don't say that, because you don't. Every grief situation is different. Worse, don't say, I understand what it's like to lose a child. My dog died, and it was so hard too. That is a huge mistake. To compare the situation with the death of a dog, even though the dog may be your only child. The comparison is not germane, and even if it is, don't make it. Each grieving situation should be respected for its uniqueness. Each story deserves to be treated without comparison. All comparisons are careless, clueless, and cruel. Oh well, you'll get over it. You'll get over it. Think about it. The trauma of death is a major disruption in one's life. Something is irretrievably lost, and there is no way back to the pre-death self of the bereaved. There can be no getting over it. So what can we say things that are helpful? I'm sorry for your loss. Please accept my condolences. This is a simple statement. I wish I had the right words. I don't. But I just want you to know I care. That's good. An honest statement. It will be appreciated. The bereaved need to have your presence more than to hear what you have to say. I don't understand, why this happened. But I'm here to help any way I can. Ladies and gentlemen, buy my book. Thank you.